Speed was never just about numbers, it was about identity. The feeling when machinery and motion align so perfectly that human and machine seem to breathe together. Every generation has its icons, but few machines have managed to blur the line between racing pedigree and road-going performance with such authority. Born in a decade when technology was rewriting what motorcycles could do, this one emerged not from marketing hype but from factory racing DNA. It was a statement of intent, a showcase of what happens when engineers refuse to compromise. The story ahead is about obsession, about how a purpose-built racer found its way to the streets, carrying the soul of competition into the everyday world. And by the end, you will see how this machine redefined what precision and control could mean for an entire era. Stay tuned, hit like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments what legendary machine you want to explore next. In 1994, Honda unveiled the RC45, a motorcycle that was never meant to blend in. It arrived not as a corporate product but as a rolling declaration that Honda still ruled the world of racing technology. The RC45, officially the RVF 750R, carried the heritage of the RC30 but spoke a sharper, more complex language of precision. Built in limited numbers and priced far above mainstream superbikes, it was the sort of machine that didn't ask for admiration, it demanded understanding. To grasp why the RC45 mattered, you have to go back to Honda's mindset in the early 1990s. Racing was not a hobby for the company, it was its heartbeat. The RC30 had conquered the late 1980s, proving the power of the V4 configuration. But by the early 1990s, technology and regulations had shifted. The RC45 was Honda's calculated response, a clean sheet design that took everything learned from endurance racing and applied it to a road-legal framework. Inside the aluminum twin-spar frame was a 749 cubic centimeters V4 engine that shared almost nothing with its predecessor. Each cylinder bank was refined for optimal balance, titanium connecting rods reduced mass, and a sophisticated fuel injection system replaced carburetors entirely. In 1994, electronic injection on a production superbike was nearly unheard of. The RC45 used it not as a novelty but as an edge, offering razor-sharp throttle response and the ability to fine-tune power delivery with factory precision. Honda didn't want to build a fast bike. They wanted to build a controllable one. Every component was crafted for the purpose of winning on Sunday and selling just enough to satisfy homologation rules. Only a few hundred were made, each assembled by hand in Honda's racing division. This exclusivity wasn't marketing, it was logistics. Each part had to meet racing tolerances, meaning every RC45 was effectively a race bike with lights. On the street, the RC45 felt almost clinical. Reviewers noted its composure, the way it stayed calm where other bikes would twitch. But that same composure also made it difficult to appreciate at low speeds. It wasn't built for city rides or casual Sunday outings. Its power band came alive high in the rev range, rewarding only those who treated it as a tool, not a toy. To the untrained rider, it felt subdued. To the skilled, it revealed a depth of control unmatched by any rival. That duality made the RC45 misunderstood in its early years. Many wondered why Honda would charge so much for a bike that seemed, on paper, to offer less raw horsepower than competitors. The answer was buried in the fine print of racing homologation. The RC45 was a foundation, not a finish line. It was built to win when modified, not necessarily to dominate showroom comparison charts. The heart of its mission lay in the World Superbike Championship. Honda's engineers viewed it as the proving ground, a global stage where every bolt and algorithm would be tested under the harshest conditions. The RC45 entered the arena against lighter, more aggressive rivals from other manufacturers. Early races were difficult. The bike's conservative setup and complex electronics took time to refine. Yet behind the scenes, Honda's racing arm was relentless, of dissecting every lap for data, adjusting fuel maps, rebalancing geometry, and improving mid-range torque. Gradually, results began to shift. The RC45 started appearing closer to the podium, then on it, and finally, in control of it. On the track, its stability and linear power became its strongest weapons. Riders could push it deeper into corners, confident it would hold its line under heavy load. The frame's rigidity, criticized by some as excessive for road use, became an advantage under race conditions. Where others flexed, the RC45 stayed true. Off the track, the bike's influence spread quietly but steadily. Honda's engineers used the RC45 as a laboratory for technologies that would later define the modern superbike era. The digital fuel injection system, the precise gear ratios, and the refined engine mapping techniques all informed the next generation of motorcycles. It wasn't just about one model's success, it was about setting the engineering template for the future. That's what made the RC45 such a critical pivot point in motorcycle history. It was both the last of the analog superbikes and the first of the electronically assisted breed. It bridged two philosophies, the raw mechanical purity of racing heritage and the emerging era of computer-controlled precision. Even today, you can feel its influence in every high-performance machine that values balance over brute force. The RC45 story is one of patience, precision, and purpose. It wasn't a marketing darling or a poster bike for the casual enthusiast. It was a tool for those who spoke the same language as its engineers, those who understood that victory wasn't about spectacle, but about control. And it was that philosophy that would carry Honda into a new phase of dominance, where refinement and resilience mattered more than showmanship. The RC45 wasn't built to impress at first glance. It was built to endure the test of racing evolution itself. In the next part, we'll see how that endurance was tested, and how the RC45's reputation transformed from misunderstood road bike to a racing legend that defined a decade. When Honda introduced the RC45 to the racing world, expectations were monumental. The company had already carved its name into history with the RC30, and now the RC45 had to carry that legacy into a faster, more competitive era. Yet the early seasons were not easy. The RC45 demanded more than raw skill, it required an intimate understanding of its advanced systems. It was a bike that asked for engineering collaboration between rider and mechanic in a way few machines ever had. The RC45 749 cubic centimeters V4 was incredibly sophisticated for its time. Its fuel injection system, derived from endurance racing programs, allowed exact control over throttle mapping and power curves. Engineers could alter the bike's personality with a few computer inputs, something nearly unheard of in mid-1990s racing. But precision comes with complexity, and the RC45 took longer to perfect than Honda expected. In its first year of competition, rival machines often appeared quicker on straight lines, thanks to simpler, more aggressive setups. But on tighter circuits, the RC45 began to show its advantage. Its handling under heavy braking, its ability to maintain stability at full lean, and the way it transferred power to the rear wheel, all of these traits made it an engineer's dream. Where others relied on brute force, Honda relied on balance. Gradually, this approach began to pay off. The RC45 evolved from a cautious experiment into a dominant force in the World Superbike Championship. Riders like Aaron Slight and John Kosinski became synonymous with the machine's competitive rise. Kosinski's 1997 championship title proved that the RC45's patient engineering philosophy could triumph against lighter, simpler competitors. That victory was not just about horsepower, it was about reliability, adaptability, and precision. The RC45 excelled in endurance races where control mattered more than bursts of speed. Its refined fueling meant consistent power delivery over long distances, and its chassis allowed riders to maintain aggressive corner speeds without fatigue. In those conditions, the RC45 didn't just perform, it thrived. The success validated Honda's belief that technology, when disciplined by race data and human feedback, could outlast and outperform simpler designs. What made the RC45 truly revolutionary was its holistic design. The engine was not the centerpiece, it was one component in a finely tuned system. The frame, suspension, and even aerodynamics worked as extensions of a single mechanical philosophy. Every angle, weld, and tolerance existed for a purpose. It was this systemic approach that future Honda superbikes would inherit. But the RC45 story wasn't purely mechanical. It also marked a cultural turning point for Honda. The company's racing division, HRC, had long been seen as an elite branch, somewhat detached from the commercial side of the brand. With the RC45, that gap began to close. The lessons learned in racing found their way into production bikes faster than ever before. The RC45 became the blueprint for integrating motorsport innovation into mainstream manufacturing. Its influence extended into how Honda trained its engineers, how it approached data analysis, and how it measured success. Winning a race was no longer the only goal, it was about how much knowledge could be extracted from every lap. That philosophy became Honda's hallmark for the next 2 decades. Despite its achievements, the RC45 remained a rare sight. Few were built, and fewer still reached public roads. Those who owned one often treated it less as transportation and more as a precision instrument. Maintenance required patience, and tuning required expertise. But in return, the RC45 offered a sensation unlike any other superbike of its time: total mechanical confidence. At speed, it felt unshakable. The feedback through the chassis was so precise that riders could predict grip levels mid-corner, adjust, and continue without hesitation. It was a bike that rewarded skill and punished carelessness. On the racetrack, that character turned good riders into great ones. On the street, it made even experienced enthusiasts rethink what control meant. To this day, those who have ridden the RC45 speak about its composure. Where other machines demanded constant correction, the RC45 asked for trust, and then justified it. Every detail, from the throttle feel to the braking balance, was tuned for harmony. And when it all came together, it produced something almost meditative, the sensation of speed without chaos. But the RC45's ultimate legacy would not be measured only by trophies. It would be felt in what came next. The technologies refined through its racing campaigns became the foundation for Honda's next era of performance motorcycles. Lessons from its V4 architecture, its aluminum chassis design, and its electronic management systems led directly to machines that followed in the early 2000s. Even Honda's MotoGP prototypes drew from the data collected during the RC45's reign. It was as if each lap had been an experiment feeding into the future of racing itself. The RC45 represented more than a winning motorcycle. It symbolized the moment when precision overtook power as the true measure of progress. The machine story teaches a subtle but important truth: innovation is not just about being faster, it's about being smarter. And that mindset would ripple through Honda's design philosophy for years to come. In the next segment, we'll explore how that ripple became a legacy, how the RC45's influence outlived its production run, and how its spirit still defines what we consider a superbike today. The Honda CBR 954RR became a turning point not only for the Fireblade series but for the entire superbike world. This third segment looks at how its perfection influenced the years that followed, and why its balance of agility and control remains a benchmark for engineers today. The CBR 954RR was not just a motorcycle, it was a statement about how far precision and rider focus could go before technology began to change everything. When the Honda CBR 954RR hit the market in 2002, it was received as the closest thing to a street-legal race machine that still made sense for everyday riders. It showed that a superbike could be both ferocious and friendly, that power could be harnessed through balance rather than excess. For Honda, this was the final expression of the Fireblade's original vision, a machine defined by total control, not total output. But as the industry evolved, the definition of control itself began to shift. Within a few short years, rival manufacturers began introducing electronic aids, traction control, ride-by-wire throttles, and eventually, full digital stability systems. These innovations reshaped the superbike category, but they also marked the end of something special. The Honda CBR 954RR stood as the last truly analog Fireblade, a machine that trusted the rider's senses more than sensors. It did not correct your mistakes, it taught you not to make them. For that reason, it became a rite of passage for serious riders, a machine that demanded precision and rewarded mastery. The influence of the 954RR extended deep into design philosophy. Honda engineers carried forward lessons from its geometry and weight optimization into later generations, even as electronics became part of the equation. The idea that agility mattered more than raw power stayed alive long after the Fireblade name grew more complex. Modern superbikes still borrow from the 954RR's balance principles, centralized mass, linear throttle response, and ergonomics designed for intuitive movement. Even with today's sensors and processors, engineers still talk about rider feel as an essential metric, a concept the 954RR defined 2 decades ago. For many enthusiasts, the 954RR also symbolized the end of the golden age of mechanical purity. It was the last moment when performance depended entirely on physical craftsmanship and rider skill. Every component, from throttle cable to brake lever, was a direct line of communication. There was no software smoothing your inputs or saving you from excess. This demanded responsibility, but it also offered authenticity. Riders knew exactly where their limits, and the bike's limits, were. That transparency became part of the Fireblade's enduring identity. The Honda CBR 954RR's impact can also be felt culturally. It became a collector's favorite not because of rarity, but because of feel. Riders who owned one often refused to sell it, describing it as irreplaceable. The connection it offered could not be replicated by newer machines with more features. It was the difference between playing a real instrument and using digital sound. One required skill, the other simulation. That sense of direct artistry made the 954RR timeless. Track riders found that the 954RR's precision gave them confidence to push harder. The chassis feedback was so vivid that they could sense tire grip through subtle cues, the frame flex, the pitch under braking, the whisper of traction returning as they eased open the throttle. It made them faster not by overpowering them, but by teaching them to trust their own coordination. In professional settings, instructors even used the 954RR to train riders on reading mechanical feedback before moving to electronically assisted bikes. That legacy speaks volumes about its character. Even as the Fireblade evolved in later years, the 954RR remained a reference point. Engineers often described it internally as the model that captured the brand spirit perfectly. It was the high watermark before changing emissions rules and safety standards forced heavier, more complex machines. Yet, while later Fireblades became more powerful and sophisticated, none carried the same purity of intent. The 954RR represented a balance that the industry would spend decades trying to rediscover. Honda's approach with the CBR 954RR also left a mark on how performance motorcycles were marketed. It proved that finesse could sell as powerfully as horsepower. Advertisements highlighted agility, control, and connection rather than sheer numbers. That messaging changed how riders viewed superbikes. They began to value the complete experience, not just statistics. In that sense, the 954RR reshaped expectations for what a superbike should be. Decades later, enthusiasts still talk about how alive the 954RR feels, even by modern standards. It is not the fastest, nor the most technologically advanced, but it remains one of the most rewarding. Modern riders often describe it as a reminder of what riding used to mean before algorithms filtered the experience. The Fireblade's essence, the belief that a motorcycle should amplify human skill, not replace it, lives strongest in the 954RR. The 954RR's legacy also shaped Honda's later engineering culture. It reminded designers that emotion and trust mattered as much as precision. Future generations of Fireblades may have introduced electronic aids, variable valve timing, and advanced aerodynamics, but each one still carried a piece of that 2002 DNA. The CBR 954RR taught Honda that perfection was not about control through computers, but connection through feel. Beyond the technical world, the CBR 954RR inspired a kind of nostalgia among riders who experienced it firsthand. It represented freedom in its purest form, a time when riding was raw, personal, and unfiltered. Even those who never owned one often recognized its silhouette instantly, the compact stance, the sharp fairing lines, the purposeful posture. It became a visual shorthand for everything that made early 2000s sport bikes so captivating. Today, collectors search for clean examples of the Honda CBR 954RR, preserving them as symbols of an era that will never return. Many have been restored, cared for meticulously, and displayed as living art. Others are still ridden hard, their owners refusing to let them sit idle because that would betray what the bike was built for. The 954RR was meant to move, to breathe, to be experienced, not stored behind glass. Its influence extends even to new riders who discover it years later. In a world filled with digital dashboards and adaptive systems, climbing onto a 954RR feels almost foreign: light clutch, sharp throttle, mechanical honesty. It demands respect immediately, yet rewards confidence with joy that modern electronics sometimes dilute. That emotional contrast explains why the 954RR continues to inspire even those who never rode during its original era. The ultimate legacy of the Honda CBR 954RR is philosophical. It proved that mastery lies in simplicity, that removing unnecessary complexity can reveal deeper connection. It embodied Honda's belief that technology should serve the rider, not overshadow them. In doing so, it became more than a superbike. It became a lesson in restraint, craftsmanship, and trust. As we reach the end of this story, it becomes clear that the 2002 Honda CBR 954RR was not just another step in evolution. It was the closing chapter of a philosophy that began with the very first Fireblade. The story of the Honda RC45 comes full circle not with its retirement, but with its ongoing influence. Decades after its debut, it remains a benchmark for how racing technology and production design can coexist without compromise. When you look at today's high-performance motorcycles, you can still trace the RC45's fingerprints across nearly every critical component. From the precision of fuel injection to the stiffness of aluminum frames, the logic behind modern superbikes was forged in the RC45's pursuit of harmony between control and speed. The motorcycle world evolved rapidly after its era. Electronics became smarter, data collection became constant, and aerodynamics turned into digital science. Yet at the core of all this progress lies the same principle the RC45 introduced, that true performance comes from understanding balance. The RC45 did not chase the wildest power figures, it pursued the most usable ones. It wasn't built to overwhelm riders, it was built to let them perform at their best. That philosophy resonates even stronger today, when motorcycles are defined as much by computer algorithms as by combustion engines. The RC45's legacy reminds engineers that the goal is not to let the machine ride for the human, but to let human and machine operate as one. On the collector side, the RC45 has achieved near-mythic status. Original examples in pristine condition command extraordinary prices, but more than monetary value, they carry emotional weight. To those who understand its lineage, owning an RC45 is like holding a chapter of engineering evolution. It's a reminder of the time when manufacturers build machines not for trends, but for truth. Every fastener, every welded seam, and every carefully calculated gear ratio spoke to a single purpose: perfection through precision. That level of commitment is rare in any era. What makes the RC45 timeless is how it captured that commitment in metal and motion. Its race victories were significant, but its influence on philosophy was even greater. It taught Honda and the industry that technology must serve feel, not replace it. Modern motorcycles, from superbikes to grand tourers, still echo that lesson through ride-by-wire systems tuned to replicate the natural touch of a perfect throttle. The RC45 was doing that before it was common vocabulary. It's easy to view the RC45 through nostalgia, as a relic of a simpler yet more focused time, but its story is not about the past. It's about continuity. Every time an engineer sits down to design a new performance machine and asks, how can we make it both faster and more controllable, they are, knowingly or not, continuing the RC45's mission. That's the real measure of its success. It didn't just win races, it redefined what those wins could mean. The RC45 proved that victory is not the end of innovation, but its byproduct. And that belief continues to drive design thinking at Honda and beyond. In the end, the RC45's greatest triumph was not its championship or its exclusivity, it was its philosophy. It showed that the pursuit of perfection is not a sprint but a discipline, a mindset that values refinement as much as speed. For those who ride, build, or simply admire motorcycles, the RC45 stands as a silent teacher. It whispers that excellence has no shortcuts, that every small detail matters, and that true mastery lies in balance. So the next time you see a modern superbike carve through a corner with perfect poise, remember where that confidence was born. The Honda RC45 of 1994 was not just a machine, it was a movement, one that continues to shape the future of performance engineering. Its story reminds us that even in a world obsessed with faster and newer, precision never goes out of style.